Today, we're diving into 10 of the strangest, most well-documented dimensional mysteries that science still can't fully explain. These aren't campfire stories or Reddit threads gone wild. These cases have been investigated by physicists, urban planners, park rangers, and even major universities. And the deeper you go, the stranger they get. Welcome to the first mystery, the house that lives two lives. The house that lives two lives. You'd think scientists would have a solid grasp on how houses work. Floors, walls, plumbing, maybe a raccoon in the attic, nothing too wild. But nope. In Salem, Oregon, there's a house that behaves less like a building and more like a confused time traveler. Most of the time, 1247 Maple Street is exactly what you'd expect, a cozy suburban home where Mark and Linda Jameson live with their two teenagers. But on unpredictable nights, the entire house shifts into an alternate dimension, one where the previous owners, the Morrison family, never died in the 1987 car crash that ended their lives in our timeline. This bizarre phenomenon wasn't discovered by ghost hunters or thrill-seeking teenagers. It started in 2003 when neighbors noticed lights turning on, shadows moving, and TV noise echoing through the Jameson home while the family was out of town. Police arrived expecting burglars. Instead, they found warm rooms, active appliances, and beds that looked freshly slept in, but not a single living person. Naturally, the Jamesons did what any modern family would do. They installed security cameras. What the footage showed was frankly impossible. There they were, Robert and Susan Morrison and their twin daughters, strolling through the home as if it was still 1987. Cooking, laughing, rearranging furniture. Completely unaware that another family was living in the same house, or that they themselves had died 16 years earlier. Here's where the science, or the closest thing we have to science, gets involved. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist at Oregon State University, analyzed the footage and coined the term dimensional bleeding periods. According to her, the house isn't haunted, it's overlapping. Think of it like two transparent tabs on your browser accidentally merging into one window. Two realities coexisting, unable to fully see each other, but simultaneously occupying the same coordinates in space-time. And the strangest detail, the Morrison family ages. New footage shows them as they would look today. Grey hair, slower movements, grown daughters who even bring children of their own to visit. It's as if the timeline where they survived continued uninterrupted, evolving in parallel to ours. For skeptics, the slam dunk evidence came from comparing the footage to predictions from modern aging software and family photographs from surviving Morrison relatives. The matches were eerie in their accuracy, but the real scientific curveball comes from their conversations. Audio recordings revealed the Morrisons talking about smartphones, social media, even major political events decades after they supposedly died. Meaning whatever dimension they're in isn't stuck in 1987, it somehow receives information from ours. Researchers found similar dimensional scars in other homes tied to traumatic events. The working theory: intense emotional or physical trauma might weaken space-time boundaries, allowing nearby parallel histories to bleed through. And if you think that's unsettling, wait until we get to the forest where you can meet your future self and they actually give good advice. The Future Echo Forest. You'd think running into your ex on a hiking trail is the worst kind of awkward. But imagine running into yourself, not metaphorically. Literally you just from tomorrow. Welcome to the Future Echo Forest. Deep inside Washington's Olympic National Forest, where time doesn't flow so much as it folds, loops, and occasionally taps you on the shoulder. Since 1994, hikers on a particular trail have been reporting something that sounds like a rejected plot from a sci-fi show. They encounter future versions of themselves. Not ghostly apparitions, not visions. These future selves are solid, fully physical, and often annoyingly well-informed. The Park Service first took it seriously when people began reporting the same experience over and over. I saw myself, and they warned me about something that hadn't happened yet. One of the most famous incidents happened in 2008. Dr. Michael Chen, a real mild-mannered geologist, was hiking when he ran into himself returning from the summit. Future Chen told present Chen to avoid a specific section of trail because a rock slide would occur in exactly 3 hours. Present Chen listened, took a different route, and sure enough, the slide happened at the predicted time. The accuracy was so precise, it later appeared in a Nature article about localized temporal anomalies. Rangers eventually recorded over 200 cases of hikers meeting future versions of themselves. Most encounters last 10 to 15 minutes and occur only at certain GPS coordinate spots where electromagnetic meters spike in strange rhythmic patterns. Geological surveys show that the ground beneath those points contains unusual crystalline formations, almost like natural antennas bending space-time. Researchers from MIT later noted that these crystals resemble the kind used in experimental quantum time alignment tests. The forest doesn't just reveal future people, it shows future scenes. Hikers report glimpsing trails that won't be constructed for years, ranger stations that don't yet exist, and even future storm damage. In one case, a hiker photographed a fallen tree that hadn't fallen yet a full week before the storm that eventually knocked it down. The most surreal case involved photographer Lisa Rodriguez. She didn't just meet her future self, she met an entire future friend group. 6 months later, she joined a hiking club and recognized every single person from her preview. They recognized her too because their future selves had already told them the story. The accuracy of these encounters is astonishing. Dr. Sarah Kim's temporal research group found a 94% prediction success rate. In physics terms, that's absurd. In science terms, that's career-making. In everyday terms, that's spooky. One prevailing theory is that the forest becomes a natural time blender, briefly allowing multiple potential futures to overlap with the present. It's not full-time travel, more like time echoing before it happens. And if you think that's wild, just wait. Because our next stop isn't the future or the present, it's medieval Prague, where the entire city centre occasionally swaps itself out for the 14th century, and everyone in it. The medieval overlay. You'd think a city as old as Prague would have a few mysteries, secret tunnels, unsolved legends, maybe a ghost story or two. But no, Prague decided to skip all that and go straight to time-swapping entire city blocks. In the heart of downtown, several modern streets periodically dissolve into a fully functional 14th century version of Prague. We're talking cobblestones that feel hand-cut air that smells of wood smoke, and locals speaking Middle Czech so fluently that even historians need a minute to catch up. This medieval overlay has been documented since 1995, when tourist Margaret Fleming wandered into what she assumed was a historical reenactment. Except reenactors don't typically craft pottery using 600-year-old techniques or react with genuine confusion when you show them a digital camera. Security footage around the area shows something remarkable. The shift doesn't occur all at once. Modern buildings fade like dissolving photographs, while medieval structures materialize in expanding rings starting at Old Town Square. In about 10 minutes, 4 entire city blocks become 1300s. Prague, complete with shops, taverns, blacksmiths, and citizens going about their day as if the Black Death is still a fresh rumor. Historians from Charles University, including Dr. Pavel Novus, have interacted extensively with these medieval residents. They aren't actors. They're not hallucinations. They have jobs, families, debts, gossip, and very strong opinions about taxes. Their dialect is so authentic that linguistic experts have used these events to refine reconstructions of Middle Czech speech. Chemical analysis of objects purchased during overlay events reveals something incredible. These items are genuinely medieval in their materials craftsmanship and wear patterns. No modern laboratory can fake 600 years of microscopic aging on iron nails or wooden bowls. The accuracy extends beyond objects. Census records from the 1300s match the names, occupations, and even family structures of people encountered during the overlays. It's as if the city is temporarily syncing with a preserved timeline, one that continued developing on its own while our version marched through centuries of history. Even more intriguing, electronics fail completely inside the overlay. Phones die instantly. Cameras refuse to power on. It's like the medieval dimension operates under slightly different physical laws, not incompatible, but simply out of tune with ours. MIT researchers once compared it to 2 radio frequencies colliding with one, briefly overpowering the other. Meteorologists noticed a strange pattern. 2 overlays almost always occur under the same atmospheric conditions. Heavy overcast skies, high humidity, and electromagnetic readings mimicking the climate of Prague, exactly as recorded in 1357. Some scientists think the atmosphere itself may act as a kind of natural tuning device, briefly aligning 2 timelines. But if you think replacing a few city blocks is intense, buckle up. Our next phenomenon replaces an entire city, and not with the past, but with a version of itself from a parallel timeline where disaster never struck. The duplicate city. You'd think a city couldn't just swap itself out like an alternate save file on a video game. But the residents of Duluth, Minnesota know better. Because every now and then, they wake up to find their city replaced by a version from a timeline where one catastrophic event never happened. In our history, the Cloquet Fire of 1918 devastated the region, wiping out neighborhoods and reshaping the city's development. But during these dimensional episodes, first documented in 2001, Duluth doesn't look like a city rebuilt. It looks like one that never burned at all. Resident Frank Morrison, no relation to our earlier Morrison family, presumably first brought attention to the phenomenon when he tried to visit the neighborhood he grew up in. Instead of the empty lots and modern houses he knew, he found streets that should have been erased by fire. Not only standing, but thriving. Houses with a century's worth of architectural evolution. Shops that looked like they'd been in business for generations. City planners initially dismissed the reports as mistaken locations, until dozens of others described the same thing: Duluth, but not our Duluth. During these episodes, the city becomes an overlay of two realities. Visitors can walk into buildings that don't exist in our timeline, talk to people who never died in the fire, and buy goods from century-old businesses that technically shouldn't exist at all. The alternate dimension isn't a snapshot of 1918. It's a fully developed version of Duluth that simply never experienced the tragedy. Urban planner Dr. Rebecca Foster led a detailed mapping project and identified over 300 structures that appear only during dimensional episodes. And they're not random. They match perfectly with historical predictions of what the city would have looked like if the fire had never occurred. Architectural historians were stunned. The alternate Duluth follows the same growth patterns they'd theorized for decades. Visitors report the alternate city feels completely solid and real. No distortion, no haze, no signs of simulation. You can dine at restaurants that don't exist in our world, check into hotels that should have burned, and interact with people who lived long, full lives in a timeline where 1918 wasn't a turning point. Photographs taken during the overlap reveal entirely different skylines depending on the angle. Two versions of the same block, one burned, one thriving, coexisting like layers of a multi-exposure image. When the episode ends, people often bring back physical objects from the parallel world. And here's the kicker: those objects remain even after the shift reverses. Economists have even studied the alternate Duluth for insights. It turns out cities without major disasters grow differently. Healthier economies, denser urban cores, more intergenerational businesses. It's like watching a real-life what-if scenario rendered in brick and mortar. But Duluth is just one place where physical laws go sideways. Head into Glacier National Park and things don't just overlap, they outright reverse. The backwards physics zone. You'd think gravity would be one of those non-negotiable laws of the universe. The kind you can trust. The kind that won't suddenly decide to yeet you into the sky like a balloon someone let go of at a birthday party. And yet, in a remote corner of Glacier National Park, Montana, that's exactly what happens. This bizarre region, known simply as the backwards physics zone, first came to light in 2006, when park ranger Tom Bradley watched a stream flow uphill. Not a trick of perspective. Not wind, not ice. Real water defying gravity with a confidence normally reserved for golden retrievers and billionaires. Investigators soon discovered the anomaly affected a perfectly circular area roughly 200 meters wide. Inside it, physics doesn't just get weird, it flips. Drop a rock and it shoots upward. Let go of your backpack and it drifts toward the clouds like it's been recruited by Pixar. Fire freezes into blue-white crystals. Ice hisses with warmth. Batteries charge themselves. Even time feels different. Like events are happening before their causes, a kind of reverse causality hangover. Dr. Lisa Chang, a theoretical physicist from MIT, spent weeks testing the anomaly and confirmed something astonishing. This zone behaves exactly like a universe where the arrow of time runs backward. In ours, entropy increases. Things fall apart, mix, break, scatter. But inside the zone, entropy decreases. Shattered glass reassembles. Mixed liquids separate into perfect layers. Damaged branches reknit themselves like a biological rewind button. Independent research teams replicated the results. Electromagnetic sensors showed reversed field polarity. Thermal cameras recorded heat flowing from colder objects to hotter ones, the opposite of every thermodynamics law ever written. Even sound waves behave strangely, bending back toward their source instead of spreading outward. But perhaps the most unsettling detail is that the boundary is razor sharp. Put one hand inside the zone and you'll feel upward pull while the rest of your body feels normal downward gravity. It's like someone sliced the universe and taped two different physical rulebooks together. Local indigenous tribes have long spoken about a gateway to the upside-down world, a place where spirits walked backward through time. Scientists, perhaps unwilling to admit that their equations didn't see this coming, avoided that phrasing, but the description is eerily accurate. And there's a worrying trend: the zone is expanding. Very slowly, about a meter per year, but steadily. If it continues, it could eventually affect entire valleys. Some aerospace researchers dream of using reversed physics for propulsion breakthroughs. Others warn that if entropy reversal spreads too far, everyday processes like combustion or chemical reactions could behave unpredictably. But as bizarre as a physics-flipping bubble in the Rockies may be, our next stop is even stranger, a town where the very math of probability comes unglued. A place where impossible events become normal and everyday routines become statistically impossible. The probability leak. You'd think probability basic chance would be one of the few things in life you can rely on. Flip a coin 50-50. Roll a die 1 in 6. Try to find your car keys. Okay, maybe that one's always impossible. But in the small town of Millfield, Ohio, chance itself breaks down in spectacular ways. Locals call these episodes luck storms. Scientists prefer probability distortions. But no matter what you call them, the effect is the same. The most unlikely events become routine, while simple, everyday tasks suddenly defy all logic. The first scientific investigation began in 2004, led by statistician Dr. Robert Kim, who arrived expecting urban legends. Instead, he found a week where 17 residents won lottery prizes. Not bought tickets won. 3 long-lost family reunions happened the same day. 5 couples met their future spouses in circumstances so absurdly improbable they boarded on cosmic matchmaking. And then the inversions started. Car keys showing up inside sealed containers. Traffic lights blinking in mathematically perfect patterns instead of random cycles. Coin flips landing in sequences that matched complex prime number arrays. Card shuffles producing exact deck orders predicted minutes earlier. Dr. Kim's team used high-speed cameras and probability modeling software to study these events. They concluded that the town wasn't experiencing randomness. It was experiencing meaningful improbability, as if events were being guided by some hidden statistical blueprint. The most unsettling part: during luck storms, the improbable seems to predict the future. A woman who found a wedding ring in her mailbox despite not being engaged ended up marrying someone with that exact ring design 2 years later. A child whose dice kept rolling the number 7 drew a picture of a storm with 7 lightning bolts. And a freak meteorological event hit town with 7 distinct power outages. It's as if the universe in that moment is whispering hints from alternate timelines. Biologists got pulled into the mystery when Dr. Sarah Wilson discovered that during probability storms, genetic mutations occur at rates 10,000 times higher than normal, but only beneficial ones. Chronic illnesses disappear. Nearsighted people report perfect vision. In one case, a long-time pianist suddenly developed ambidexterity overnight. That shouldn't be possible. But probability storms rewrite the rulebook. Scientists now believe Millfield overlaps with a dimension governed by inverted mathematical laws. A reality where rare events are common and common events are rare. Atmospheric monitors show electromagnetic fluctuations forming geometric patterns similar to those used in advanced quantum randomization experiments. The theory during these storms, the thin boundary separating our probability system from this alternate one, weakens, allowing the two to interfere like 2 overlapping radio signals. Residents have adapted. During storms, they follow intuition rather than logic. People switch routes, call old friends, buy lottery tickets, or avoid certain decisions entirely. As one resident joked to National Geographic, "If you feel lucky, act on it. If you feel unlucky, go home." And if you think a town with broken math is weird, wait until you hear what's happening in Seattle, where the buildings themselves have started to wake up. The living architecture. You'd think skyscrapers would be the least emotional things on Earth. Steel, concrete, glass, cold, unfeeling materials that don't care how your day went. But in downtown Seattle, that assumption has problems, because several buildings there have begun behaving less like structures and more like living creatures. The phenomenon started quietly in 2010 when maintenance workers at the Columbia Center noticed the HVAC system adjusting itself in response not to temperature changes, but to people's moods. If someone stressed walked into the lobby, the air cooled and softened. If a group arrived laughing, the lights warmed. At first, it seemed like an advanced AI glitching in a charmingly helpful way. But the truth was stranger. Security footage revealed walls that pulsed rhythmically, like they had a heartbeat. Elevators that moved to the floor people were thinking about even before they pressed a button. And structural beams that subtly shifted their tension patterns when storms approached, almost like bracing themselves. Dr. Amanda Foster, a biomechanical engineer from the University of Washington, led the first deep investigation. What she found turned architecture into biology. Thermal imaging showed heat patterns flowing through buildings exactly like blood circulation. Acoustic scans revealed low-frequency pulses identical to heart rhythms in large mammals. Electromagnetic sensors picked up activity patterns indistinguishable from neural firing. But here's the part that keeps engineers awake at night. The transformation isn't limited to the surface. Samples of steel showed cellular microstructures almost like metallic tissues replicating and repairing themselves. Concrete developed porous networks resembling living bone. Even the glass began behaving like a selectively permeable membrane regulating airflow and humidity, as if it were a giant slow-breathing lung. And the buildings aren't just alive, they're aware. During active phases, structures respond to individual occupants. They brighten when certain people enter. They dim for others. Some regular tenants say the buildings recognize them adjusting temperature or elevator positions based on personal preference without a single manual input. One office worker reported that the wall lights flickered sympathetically whenever she cried. Another claimed the elevator refused to drop him off on a floor where he had a stressful meeting, as if trying to protect him. Independent engineering firms verified the biological changes, which is particularly alarming because engineering firms do not like surprises. Steel beams showed pulsating transport channels. Concrete samples reacted to electrical stimulation like muscle fibers. These aren't mechanical malfunctions. They're biological evolution. Even stranger, the effect is spreading. Nearby buildings initially unaffected have begun developing faint rhythmic pulses and subtle metabolic signatures, almost as if the living structures are infecting neighboring architecture. Researchers at MIT compared it to the way coral reefs expand living structures, gradually transforming inanimate ones. Some scientists propose that Seattle is experiencing contact with a dimension where architecture evolved organically like trees or fungi. In that reality, buildings wouldn't be constructed, they'd be grown. And if that sounds unbelievable, let's head to California, where an entire laboratory doesn't just react to emotions, it turns them into physical forces. The Emotion Physics Laboratory. You'd think emotions were just feelings, invisible internal messy little chemical storms sloshing around in the brain. But in one laboratory at the Stanford Research Institute, emotions aren't hidden at all. They spill directly into the physical world, altering gravity, electricity, temperature, and even the atomic behavior of matter. It started in 2007 when researcher Dr. Patricia Wong noticed that her experiment results fluctuated wildly depending on her mood. When she was calm, lasers behaved normally. When she was frustrated, electrical interference spiked. When she was deeply sad, objects on her desk grew inexplicably heavier. At first, she blamed stress. Then she blamed faulty equipment. Then she ran controlled experiments, and the equipment blamed her. Within months, the institute confirmed what should have been impossible. The entire lab had become a consciousness-active zone, a space where human emotions directly shaped physical reality. The team began mapping emotional states like they were studying a fifth fundamental force. Anger produced heat and boosted electromagnetic fields. Fear disrupted electronics. Sadness increased gravity within a few meters of the subject. Joy decreased local gravitational pull. Researchers joked that happiness literally made the room lighter. The data wasn't subtle or metaphorical. Instruments registered spikes and dips so dramatic that they were sometimes visible on analog dials. In one test, 12 volunteers synchronized their emotional states. Calm breathing, shared focus, and successfully levitated a metal sphere for nearly 3 seconds. That single experiment forced the team to file a restricted report with federal agencies. But the most astonishing discovery came when the researchers realized the lab wasn't just amplifying emotions, it was reading them. The space had effectively become a mirror dimension interface where consciousness and matter operated under identical rules. Thought patterns appeared in air currents. Emotional pressure fields could be mapped like weather systems, and tiny atmospheric distortions acted like emotional fingerprints. Brain imaging of long-term researchers revealed new neural pathways forming, almost like the mind was learning to project itself into the environment. Some team members developed the ability to intentionally dampen or amplify their emotional fields, almost like tuning a radio. And the effects weren't confined to mood shifts. In collective experiments, a team experiencing synchronized compassion increased the coherence of laser beams far beyond normal physics limits. Groups experiencing panic once shorted out every device in the room simultaneously. Independent institutions eventually replicated these findings, confirming the phenomenon wasn't a fluke. It was a stable, measurable interaction between mind and matter. The working theory. The lab overlaps with a dimension where consciousness is a fundamental physical force, much like gravity is in ours. And while that sounds incredible, it comes with dangers. Extreme emotional spikes have caused localized gravitational anomalies strong enough to bend metal rails. One outburst of collective fear led to a spontaneous electromagnetic pulse that knocked out building-wide power. Security now requires emotional monitoring. Calm minds only. No distress allowed. Imagine showing up to work and needing to prove you're not in a bad mood because the walls might explode. But as bizarre as emotion-shaped physics is, it still can't prepare you for our next phenomenon. a neighborhood where time itself can't decide how fast it wants to move. The time dilation neighborhood. You'd think time would be the one thing everyone experiences equally. A minute is a minute, an hour is an hour. Unless you're stuck in a Zoom meeting, in which case time stops entirely. But on Maplewood Drive in suburban Denver, time doesn't stay put. It stretches, compresses, speeds up, slows down, and sometimes refuses to match the house next door. The weirdness began in 2012, when neighbors realized something bizarre. The Johnson family looked like they had aged 5 years over what everyone else experienced as just a few months. Meanwhile, the Millers, who lived 3 houses down, looked exactly the same, as if only a couple of days had passed for them. Temporal physicist Dr. Angela Rodriguez from the University of Colorado set up monitoring stations throughout the neighborhood and made a stunning discovery. Each house existed in its own temporal bubble. Some accelerated time, some slowed it, and others drifted in and out like faulty clocks. One home experienced minutes like hours, while another treated entire days as a coffee break. Sensors detected measurable differences in aging rates, metabolism, even circadian rhythms. Families living in fast time needed extra meals and slept more, but otherwise remained perfectly healthy. To them, everything felt normal except for the awkward fact that their neighbors aged at a completely different pace. One resident joked, "You can bake bread in one house and watch it rise in real time next door." Except it's not really a joke. During one documented episode, paramedics arrived to help a resident in a fast time home. To them, the family inside had been waiting 40 minutes, but to observers outside, only 3 minutes had passed. Weather seems to trigger these temporal distortions. High-pressure systems and electromagnetic fluctuations, especially during thunderstorms, correspond almost exactly with time dilation events. In fact, atmospheric readings during these anomalies resemble those predicted in theoretical models of dimensional boundaries. It's as if Maplewood Drive sits directly on top of a fragile membrane between timelines that flow at different speeds. The human consequences are heartbreaking. Friendships between children collapse under the weight of mismatched time. A slow-time kid might experience only a few days, while their best friend next door lives through an entire school year. Birthday parties become emotional landmines. Graduations happen overnight, depending on which house you live in. Real estate agents can't even price the homes anymore. A property that stays pristine for years might sit next to one that ages decades in a single season. Home inspections now require specialized temporal audits. One chilling report involved a couple living in a slow-time bubble who stepped outside during an episode and found their newborn daughter in fast time next door, now a toddler. To them, only a week had passed. To their neighbors, it had been almost 2 years. The scientific frontier here is massive. Temporal anomalies like this suggest that time isn't a constant flow, but a patchwork, a quilt of overlapping temporal fabrics, each stitched from a different dimension's physics. Maplewood Drive just happens to sit on the fraying edge. And if visualizing time as fabric sounds abstract, just wait. Our final mystery is a place where thoughts themselves become physical objects, where consciousness manifests in the air like geometric mist. The consciousness mirror dimension. You'd think thoughts were the one thing in the universe that stayed strictly inside your head, private, invisible, safe from anyone else's eyes. But in one research facility at UC Berkeley, that illusion collapsed in 2015 when scientists stepped into a room where thoughts didn't just exist. They appeared. It started when neuroscientist Dr. Michael Chen walked into the experimental chamber and noticed translucent shapes drifting around him. At first, he assumed it was dust catching the light. Then the shapes changed, shifting color and geometry in perfect sync with what he was thinking. He ran out of the room, convinced he was hallucinating. But when he brought in his team, every single one of them saw the same thing. Within weeks, the chamber was confirmed to be a consciousness mirror zone, a space where thoughts manifest as physical, measurable structures. Analytical thinking produced crystalline forms, sharp, angular, fractal-like shards that shimmered with internal light. Creative thoughts flowed as soft morphing shapes like living smoke. Emotional states became atmospheric warm golden haze for love, cold violet ripples for fear, storm-like patterns for anxiety. These weren't mere visuals. Instruments detected mass electromagnetic signatures and even gravitational microdistortions. In one experiment, a researcher thinking intensely about stability generated a geometric platform strong enough to support a metal object. The deeper the team explored, the stranger it became. Multiple people thinking together created collective structures more stable and complex than anything a single person could produce. Shared concepts formed lattices that persisted for hours, even after the group left the room. Like the mental equivalent of coral reefs, independent labs were invited to verify the phenomenon. They confirmed that the chamber operated like a dimensional overlap with a universe where consciousness and matter were equally real, two sides of the same coin. In that realm, thoughts naturally manifest as physical forms, and material objects are partially shaped by cognitive intention. Neural imaging showed that exposure to the chamber rewired the brain. Researchers developed stronger visualization abilities, improved memory, and in some cases, heightened emotional awareness. One scientist described it as seeing your mind from the outside, like hearing your own voice for the first time. But not everything was serene. Chaotic or dark thoughts produced dangerous manifestations. Jagged crystalline spikes, toxic fogs, electromagnetic distortions that could fry equipment. Security protocols now require mental training before anyone enters the chamber. Calm thoughts only. No stress allowed. One infamous incident involved a researcher experiencing panic during a trial. The chamber filled instantly with spined crystalline structures that shattered equipment and forced an emergency evacuation. The structures dissolved minutes later, but the message was clear: the mind is powerful and not always kind. The consciousness mirror chamber now stands as one of the strongest pieces of evidence that the mind may not be confined to the body, and that thought itself might be a universal force just waiting for the right dimensional doorway to become visible. And now, with all 10 mysteries on the table, let's pull everything together. After traveling through dimensional houses, time-warping forests, medieval cities, probability-breaking towns, and mind-made matter, one thing becomes crystal clear. Our universe is far stranger and far less stable than we like to believe. Think about the highlights for a moment. A suburban home in Oregon where two families from two different timelines cook dinner in the same kitchen. A forest in Washington where tomorrow's version of you can casually tap you on the shoulder. A slice of Prague that slips into the 14th century so convincingly that historians have updated textbooks because of it. A small town in Ohio where chance behaves like it's following a secret script instead of randomness. And a lab where emotions behave like gravity, bending the world around them. These cases aren't just stories, they're reminders. Science, for all its brilliance, is still a work in progress. We understand enough to build rockets and decode genomes, but not enough to explain why time sometimes forgets to march in a straight line, or why thoughts can solidify into floating shapes under the right conditions. Maybe that's the beauty of it. For centuries, humans believed the Earth was the center of the universe. We believed illness came from bad air, that stars were fixed in place, and that time was absolute. Every generation inherited a version of reality they thought was final until a new discovery cracked it open. These dimensional leaks feel like the next cracks forming, early hints of a much bigger structure behind the curtain. And maybe that's why we're so captivated by mysteries like these. They remind us that the universe isn't finished revealing itself. They push scientists, thinkers, and curious people like you and me to keep asking better questions. Not, is this possible, but what does this mean about how reality works? If houses can live two lives, what does that say about ours? If forests can echo the future, what does that say about time? If buildings can wake up, what does that say about consciousness? If probability can flip, what does that say about fate? The universe might not be one tidy, isolated timeline. It might be an infinite tapestry of realities, all layered, overlapping, and occasionally brushing up against our own, just long enough to say, there's more out here. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these mysteries shook your understanding of reality the most? Which one kept echoing in your mind as you read? If you love exploring the weird, wonderful edges of science, the places where equations start to tremble and the universe gets mischievous, make sure to subscribe for more mind-bending stories every week. Until next time, stay curious. The universe is bigger than you think, and maybe closer than you realize.